Now the Philistines gathered their forces for war and assembled at Soko in Judah. They pitched camp at Ephes-dammim between Soko and Azekah. Now Saul countered by gathering his Israelite troops near the valley of Elah. So the Philistines and Israelites faced each other on opposite hills with a valley between them. Then Goliath, a Philistine champion from Gath, came out of the forces of the Philistines to face the forces of the Israelites. He was over 9 feet tall. He wore a bronze helmet, and his bronze coat of mail weighed 125 pounds. He also wore bronze leg armor, and he carried a bronze javelin on his shoulder. The shaft of his spear was as heavy and thick as a weaver's beam, tipped with an iron spearhead that weighed 15 pounds. Goliath stood and shouted a taunt across to the Israelites. "Why are you all coming out to fight? I am the Philistine champion, but you are only the servants of Saul. Choose one man to come down here and fight me. If he kills me, then we will be your slaves. But if I kill him, you will be our slaves. I defy the armies of Israel today. Send me a man who will fight me." When Saul and the Israelites heard him, they were terrified and deeply shaken. And David heard him. He asked the men standing near him, "Who is this pagan Philistine that he is allowed to defy the armies of the living God? What will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel?" Then David's question was reported to King Saul, and the king sent for him. David said to Saul, "Don't worry about this Philistine. I'll go fight him." Saul said, "Don't be ridiculous. There's no way you can fight this Philistine and possibly win. You're only a boy, and he's been a man of war since his youth." But David persisted. "I've been taking care of my father's sheep and goats. When a lion or bear comes to steal a lamb from the flock, I go after it with a club and rescue the lamb from its mouth. If the animal turns on me, I catch it by the jaw and club it to death. I have done this to both lions and bears, and I'll do it to this pagan Philistine too, for he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord, who rescued me from the claws of the lion and bear, will rescue me from this Philistine." Saul finally consented. "All right, go ahead, and may the Lord be with you." Then Saul clothed David with his own fighting attire and put a bronze helmet on him. He also put body armor on him. David strapped the sword over it and took a step or two to see what it was like, for he had never worn such things before. I can't go in these. I'm not used to them. So David took them off again. Then he took his staff in his hand and chose 5 smooth stones from the brook and put them in his shepherd's pouch. His sling was in his hand, and he approached the Philistine. Goliath walked out toward David with his shield bearer ahead of him. He looked David over and saw that he was little more than a boy, glowing with health and handsome, and he despised him. Am I a dog that you come at me with a stick?" And he cursed David by the names of his gods. "Come over here, and I'll give your flesh to the birds and wild animals." You come to me with a sword and with a spear and with a javelin. But I come to you in the name of the Lord of the hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. Today, the Lord will conquer you, and I will kill you and cut off your head. And then I will give the dead bodies of your men to the birds and wild animals. And the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel, and that all this assembly may know that the Lord saves not with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hand. As Goliath moved closer to attack, David quickly ran out to meet him, reaching into his shepherd's pouch and taking out a stone. He hurled it with his sling and hit the Philistine in the forehead. The stone sank in, and Goliath stumbled and fell face down on the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. Without a sword in his hand, he struck down the Philistine and killed him. David ran and stood over him. He took hold of the Philistine's sword and drew it from its sheath. After he killed him, he cut off his head with the sword. When the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they turned and ran. Then the men of Israel and Judah gave a great shout of triumph. Yeah! They rushed after the Philistines, chasing them as far as Gath and the gates of Ekron. Whew! As soon as David returned from killing Goliath, Abner brought him to Saul with the Philistine's head still in his hand. Saul said to David, "Whose son are you, young man?" "I am the son of your servant Jesse of Bethlehem."